People who live in cities, what are some city things country people don't understand? Walking somewhere close will always be faster than going there by a car. I lived in Boston for 4 years with no car and was just fine. You really need a dense city for this to work. Also, it had a light rail system called the T, which was excellent. Now I'm in a Dallas suburb and the light rail system fully sucks. Since it is a sparse city, widespread, it would take you an extra hour just to get to the nearest terminal. When a city person says it's quiet, he just means there's a constant faint background noise that doesn't change. Like a busy highway 300 yards away. Or living next to a railway where a train passes every 10 minutes. If there is a background noise, but it's constant, you get used to it. Noise for a city person is a siren, a car alarm, a loud explosion, that sort of stuff. Whilst for a countryside person, even hearing a highway in the distance would make him go crazy during the first nights when he lives in town. Having a dog will make you socialize a lot. When you're walking it, people with other dogs will stop to let your dogs sniff each other and you'll chit chat. Little children will want to pet your dog. And old people will tell you that your dog reminds them of their old dogs. Also, the probability that people stop you to ask for directions will significantly increase. I guess because they assume you live in the neighborhood. Being polite and talking to everyone who talks to you will get you finessed. Eye contact is an invitation to talk. Smiling is an invitation to talk. People in the city aren't rude for avoiding these. They're just tired of every conversation they have with a stranger ending in them getting asked for something. It's not that we aren't friendly. There are just so many people we can't say hello and chat with everyone, or we never get to our destinations. I love going to smaller towns and just dialing my brain back 20 miles per hour and enjoying the people. Small talk. Hitting yard sales. Visiting small restaurants where the staff engage you. The downtown smell that smells like piss? It's piss. This reason alone keeps me from living in a big city. Just the dirtiness of it. The anonymity can be freeing. Yeah. This. A waiter treated you like shit? Leave a bad tip and never go there again. You embarrassed yourself at a store? Nobody will remember or even know who you are. Just disappear into the crowd in all situations and move on. I've lived in big cities and grew up in small country towns. I prefer big cities. One big thing I love about big cities is that not everyone knows your business. You can be yourself without being prejudged for your family or what some ancestor did in the past. This is easily the biggest thing I missed when my city girl ass moved to the sticks for work for a few years. In the rural town where I lived there, people I had never talked to still knew me as Darkshines, the girl from out of town. And they would idly comment about what I might be up to anytime I went to the grocery store. Bar. Anything. Never in a malicious way. But it gave me a constant feeling of being watched that felt much more intrusive to me than the security cameras in a city. You don't really have to plan trips to get stuff. Like if we needed some milk, we wouldn't have to take inventory of our entire fridge just to see if we can get enough needs to justify a trip to the store. Most of the time we can just walk to our local shops, buy what we need, and walk back. Edit. Interesting. This comment blew up. For those of you wondering how I know this sacred knowledge, it was because I used to be a country boy. Now, as much as I love the absolute silence of a freshly harvested field or the jaw-dropping splendor of looking up at our galaxy at night, I still think having quick access to my milk is a noteworthy trade-off. Still do miss it though. It is faster for me to ride my bike to work than it is to drive. And I feel healthier both physically and mentally. Most immigrants are just living their lives, working hard, and minding their own business. Stay to the right when walking and on escalators. Don't stand in the middle of the sidewalk and block people's paths. Let people off the bus, train, elevator before you go in. I hate those rude ass people who barge onto the bus before everyone gets off. Like, would you rather wait a few seconds so everybody can get off and you have a clear path getting on? Or would you rather push and shove everybody as they're trying to exit the bus? Living in a downtown apartment isn't some kind of oppressive hell. Not everyone wants to maintain a huge house or deal with lawn mowing bylaw requirements. Many people don't give a shit about gardening and just need space for their bed, desk, and computer. Especially if they are single and live alone. A downtown apartment in cities like Nick or Toronto is also likely to be within walking distance to all sorts of restaurants, shops, and other services. Many people love being able to do this for exercise. On the same note, taking public transport is not some kind of freedom lacking hell. It's only hell if you believe it is. Many people love the freedom of being able to read books or catch up on TV shows or play games during their commutes, instead of staring at traffic for an hour each way. Many people don't give a shit about cars and prefer not paying for maintenance, insurance, etc. Taco trucks on every corner is pretty much why we moved to the city in the first place. Bigger cities we give distances and time. That is 30 minutes away or I'm 45 minutes out. Actual distance doesn't work because time of day changes it. I notice that when I visit family in rural area they give it in actual physical distance. I live in a rural area, and I've never heard someone give distance in actual units. I've always heard people say how far something is in time. Maybe this has something to do with how I live in an area with a lot of New York tourists, and they just kind of bring it here. Going carless. I moved from a small town to a fairly major US city a year ago. People from back home are completely baffled when I tell them I didn't bring my car here and I don't really want to. Most essential things are within walking distance. Public transportation works just fine 90% of the time. And Uber's always an option for the 10% it doesn't. Sure, it's inconvenient at times, but I'm saving hundreds of dollars a month. Well worth it. One of many reasons why I infinitely prefer the city. Homeless people everywhere. Cities offer a lot more for homeless people, like shelters and food kitchens. Cities likely have the need and ability to do this more than rural places, so it makes sense that they are there more. Deciding you need a new potato peeler, some daffodil bulbs, a pizza and a can of house paint at 3:48 am, and being able to get them. We tend to be more liberal because we meet more people and we are exposed to more experiences. And because of it we gain awareness and empathy for others. I'm from a small town in the Midwest. My parents met in high school and never moved out of that town. I went off to college and now live in a big city. They are far-right Fox News watching type of people. I'm very liberal and I have always said it's because I got out of that small town and met people who aren't like me. My parents don't understand what I'm talking about when I say this. Rage. Sometimes it's best to just mind your own business and leave others alone. If there's a few million people around, some of them will be LGBT, or a different religion, or different political affiliation, and you have to just shrug it off most of the time or you'll never find peace. A lot of city people are in favor of gun control because in urban areas, they're not for hunting or self-defense. They're what drug dealers and gangs use to kill each other. I disagree with most gun control, but that's why they feel that way. The police don't live in the communities they control. They're unaccountable. And you certainly don't know them personally. People see them as thugs because there's no recourse if they decide to act like thugs. Unless you are rich, you probably can't afford to give a coin to every beggar, charity stand or person. Even on a small walk you'll meet lots of them and sometimes it's best to just look at your feet. Walk past and not acknowledge them or they will physically stop you until you give them money. Also, know where your belongings are at any given second regardless if you are on the street, in a bar, pub or at the disco. I just moved from a small town on the west coast to a medium-sized city on the east coast. It's crazy that you can just go out and do things. You don't have to drive for 2 hours to go to the mall. You just go. I can have food delivered to my house in minutes and Amazon does next day delivery. It's awesome. Also, cable internet is pretty sweet after having satellite for so long. One question though. What's with all of the hibachi restaurants? It is 2 AM. Was that a gunshot or fireworks? Edit. Obviously it can be both lol. I moved to LA from a pretty small town in Wisconsin 5 years ago. And there were a lot less times I had to ask this question though. Close bracket. Our standards of politeness is different. What you would consider rude, such as ignoring other people, is not to us. And likewise what you would consider polite, such as greeting people you don't know, would be considered rude in the city. In the city, your privacy is key. And the polite thing to do is respect other people's privacy and personal space. They get to choose when to interact with people, not you. And you forcing yourself into their space and their privacy is, to be frank, rude as fuck. Minding your own business is the accepted norm. It is likely a combo of this and the sheer diversity present in cities that leads to acceptance of minorities being higher in cities than in the country. This is not to say that we ignore people. We just mind our own business. The anonymity. Being an introvert, I simply love the fact that no one cares about me whenever I go out. Just can't do that whenever I visit my hometown. For a long time I thought big cities were nightmares for introverts or people who just want to blend in and mind their own business. When I visited Nick for the first time, I felt SOOO free. Nobody gave a FCK about me. I just blended into the crowds and minded my own business. There's barely any prejudice because I guess people are so used to seeing different kinds of people and crazy people every day that they just don't care. You can't get anywhere near close to that feeling in a small town or small city. Drunk guy walking past me in the city. You're a long way from home, bro. Me wondering if I look like a hick. Yeah. What makes you say that? Drunk guy. Because you look me in the eyes like I'm a person. This stuck with me and made me thankful to live out in the country. It made me a little sad for all the anonymous forgotten people. Generally, when someone you don't know starts up a conversation with you on the street, they want money. I see this mentioned several times and I'm wondering why people think this is a city thing. I've never been approached by a stranger in my small town or any rural area that didn't end up asking for money. Or most common, a ride somewhere. The only idle chit chat I've had with strangers is something like at checkout. Or another customer inside a store. Or at an event. Strangers in parking lots. They want something. That social security programs are important. In small population areas there are maybe a few people that need the help, so it's easy to blame the person for their situation. But in large population areas the same percent, or often lower percent, of people need help, but it now adds up to far more people and becomes a lot harder to ignore. Cities are surprisingly safe. It's kind of ridiculous how many people still assume New York is this dangerous, crime-ridden place. Even cities notorious for crime like Baltimore or Chicago mostly have their crime and a few bad neighborhoods. The diversity is really wonderful in cities. Being able to get any type of food is really cool and you get to interact with people from around the world. Plus if you're a minority you probably won't stick out or be the token minority in the neighborhood. There's plenty of community in big cities. It's just a bit more diffused. Harder to see. I might not know my neighbor, but I bump into people I know in the street all the time. Moved from a city in the northeast to a more rural area down south. I miss my bus buddies from the city. Personally, I don't see that community that's so lauded in smaller town life at all. Driving 10 miles can sometimes take 60 minutes. Depending on how bad the traffic is. That's why if you suggest to go to a restaurant 2 towns over, someone might say it's too far of a drive. I live in Brooklyn and if someone wants to hang out in Harlem it's not happening. City distance can't be measured in miles. It's gotta be measured in time. Harlem is probably like 5-6 miles from me. But it's 2 hours away. It makes me feel warm and fuzzy to walk down the street not acknowledging anyone else. There's a certain kind of comfort to not caring about anyone else's business and no one caring about yours. The police don't give a shit about you and see you as the enemy. I've lived in smaller towns where police are friendly and helpful and it's not the same. So being late due to lots of traffic. So loud people at night, if you live near a pub like I do. So more worry because of the higher chance of COVID-19. So it's a lot easier to find services right at your doorstep. So we aren't as sociable or community based, unless established communities exist such as ethnic or cultural. People aren't rude. It's just that if you try to be open to everything and everyone, you get utterly overwhelmed. Yes. I can see that homeless guy could really benefit from 5 minutes and a sandwich. But what about the next guy 3 minutes down the road? Or the squaggle of Syrian refugees on the corner? In fact, are those actually Syrian refugees? Or just a bunch of bratty second-gen Turkish youths who I don't even want to give the time of day? Just because. Disclaimer. I may actually just be a massive prick. Close bracket. No. I literally cannot smell the difference between air in my city and the air on your farm. I can go from anywhere in Ontario to my family in rural Saskatchewan and that's what they always say to me. The air is so fresh, isn't it? Don't get air like this out there. Double quote. You mean air that smells like a tractor is leaking fuel and cows shitting every 10 seconds? Yeah, you can drive 5 minutes out of town and get that. I have lived in both. What I enjoy most about the city, a large city, is everything is with reach. Whatever I want, from sushi to pro sports and everything in between. I used to live on a small farm. I miss being able to pee anywhere I wanted when I was far from the house. But I like having a gas station across the street now in town. We're always in a rush because it's always crowded everywhere. The more crowded it is, the longer it takes to get from A to B. Because crowds mean people walking slowly. And the slower everyone else is, this just makes us want to get there faster. We're not actively trying to push past people out of malice. It's just the only way to get through the frustratingly slow tourists. We're on the clock. But the tourists aren't. If you've got to stop, suddenly stand for some reason, take a photo, look at a map, have a conversation, etc. All totally reasonable. I don't begrudge you that, but do not stand in the middle of the pavement. I've timed my hour commute to a minute or two. Maximize time in bed. Commuting on public transport is stressful enough without having to navigate around a bunch of people in the way of everyone else who is trying to get somewhere. I grew up in the country, so totally understand the wanting to stop to look at things. I still catch myself finding something I want to look at in architecture or the sky or something, but life is quick in the city. Step to the side or admire at a decent pace. Yes, we know where meat comes from. No. We don't think it just comes from a supermarket. We are not rude. We just can't say hello to every person we meet, otherwise we'd never get to where we need to go. The lifestyle may be too busy for you. Country life is too inconvenient for me. No way is better than the other. It depends on the person. It's okay to prefer one over the other. How to cross RF King Street. Step 1. Look both ways. Step 2. Continue to check in the direction of traffic. Step 3. If a car is coming, don't make 2 quick steps. Wave your hand once apologetically without making eye contact. And then continue at your stupid slow pace. When I lived in the city, there was an understanding that you shouldn't park in front of others' houses. There was enough space for 2 cars. Some people never parked in front of their house. So you could also park there in a pinch. It wasn't like this when I lived in Columbus, Ohio, Chicago, or Portland. So when I was in Vegas and a neighbor knocked on my buddy's app door and asked him to move his car from in front of their house, I was shocked. He jumped right up and happily moved it. They didn't even need it. Just in that area you don't park in front of people's houses. Still floored by this. Land doesn't vote. People do. Thinking about all the people during the presidential election last month who were like, but how can Biden win if the map is so red? People who think country people means uneducated mud people who hardly understand running water and electricity. Don't forget the racism and bigotry. All of us country people hate anyone even slightly different and love to cuddle our guns as we go to sleep. No way this is a close-minded statement. I'm from the city, I am open-minded. Rules I made because of family and friends from the Wop Wops. 1. Clothing is essential everywhere but the beach and bathroom. 2. If at beach, togs or at least undies need to be worn. No getting naked in front of strangers, kids please. 3. If you bring your hunting dogs, keep them on a leash. I don't wanna be charged because your dog ate another terrier or bit someone. 4. Home killers fine, but clean up after yourselves and don't throw it in the rubbish bin out front. It's not a great look for a brown guy to be chucking bloody tarps and sheets in the bin. Especially not this far south. This is pre-COVID. But, as a single person, it's amazing being able to just walk out of your app with no destination in mind. And just wander into situations and new people. In the country, since you are driving, you generally have to have a preset destination. Also, meal experiences are completely different. Getting apps at 5 different places with a drink over many hours is just a standard night. Also, no worries about getting home. Since you are walking, no need to for DDs and etc. Also, dating is a whole different experience. A date can start at a bar for a drink and progress to a museum, park, wherever you want. Also, since you can walk between spots, you are able to have some great conversations. Dating in the country, you are stuck at a destination. Blatantly ignoring someone who tries to talk to you on the street isn't considered rude. I tried to use this technique when I was in Colorado, and it did not go over as well as it does in New York City. Some guy came up to me and said, "Do you like poetry?" And my city instincts kicked in. Without thinking, I said no thanks and kept walking. He didn't take it well. Screamed in my face that there was a day in this country when men carried guns, rode horses, and read poetry. Double quote. I felt kind of bad. Because honestly, I do like poetry. I grew up in a very small rural town, hated it, then at 17 moved to a major city and stayed for over 20 years. 8 years ago we moved out to the country. 2 major things I miss about living in a large city. 1. Efficiency. Everything is done 10 times faster in the city. Shopping, banking, dining out. No one is going to spend 30 minutes chit-chatting with you at the bank or grocery store. 2. City people are much friendlier. In the city I lived in an older central area. Very multicultural. I seriously miss the wonderful sense of community we had there. Everyone was so warm and friendly. We had block parties and helped each other out all of the time. I miss that. It was a huge culture shock to move to the country. Everyone is very cold and distant, and extremely paranoid of anyone new. Overall, I much prefer living in the country, but I definitely miss our wonderful neighbors from the city. How to ignore weird things or stuff happening that's none of your business. Yeah. There might be someone freaking out. Are they freaking out on you? No, then keep it pushing. 2 people getting physical, aka freaky, on the park bench. Ain't none of your damn business. That you mind your own damn business. When everyone lies right on top of each other. Privacy is at a premium. Obviously. If someone asks for help, or your input, you oblige. Likewise. If it's obvious someone needs help, but can't ask, you do what you can. But, if no one is being hurt, or if they are dealing with the situation they're in, leave them the FCK alone. Don't gawk. Living in a big city, you'll usually have a small apartment. But it's not a big issue. The apartment is your staging area and the city itself is your living room. Also, whenever I get into the city, moved back to suburbia after meeting my now husband, I feel like my body can fully relax when I step onto the sidewalk outside Penn Station in New York City. There's something almost freeing about being a lone person in a massive, crazy city. I grew up in the city for 28 years. My husband and I bought a farmhouse on 5 acres, and I can say this. We don't have easy access to shit. Fast food, groceries, a nice restaurant are all about a 45-minute drive. The closest gas station is about 15 minutes, not bad, but in the city it was a 2-minute drive to anything you wanted or needed. So we had to learn how to plan ahead for anything. Also the storms in the city that I thought were scary, Iowa, such as tornadoes, high wind, hail, snowstorms, are 1000x times worse out in the middle of f***ing nowhere. But the peace of mind in the country is so worth it. The town we live in is the farming community of another town. No one has ever heard of our town. Our population is about 150 all farmers. We have our own rules and laws. We never hear sirens, gunshots. It is so peaceful. Don't stop in weird places. Be considerate of others and step out of the flow of foot traffic. Don't stop when in front of the escalator or elevator. Don't stop when you step off the train or bus. Or when you walk in the doors of a big building. Or at the top or bottom of some stairs. This is the biggest tell someone is from a small town. Stopping in weird places. City people know to stand off to the side and not block entrances, exits, or walkways. Cities are not nearly as dangerous or scary as people make it out to be. This was especially true during the protests this summer. I got so many phone calls from family back home that offered to house me during the unrest and I was like, no thanks. Those riots are like a city mile away from me. Double quote. People thinking we up here digging trenches defending a blitzkrieg. Hello from New York City. I would say it's having an awareness of the flow of chi energy. Like having spatial awareness enough to move out of the way of someone who is outpacing you. Letting foot traffic flow around you if you want to stop to check your phone. Not walking four abreast on the sidewalk, etc. I grew up in a small town and the first time I went to Nashville and had to pay for parking, I was blown away. I was like, what do you mean we have to pay for parking? It's land. So we should be able to park there. Double quote. Getting a bunch of groceries at once is a lot harder than getting stuff as needed. We lived in a small apartment in a high rise and getting a lot of groceries at once meant a lot of trips up and down the elevator, if the elevator works that day. Much easier to go a few times a week. Keep to one side of the escalator in the metro. One side's for standing still. The other side's for people who are walking. Every time there's a traffic jam trying to transfer from one line to another, it is 100% a tourist standing in the walking lane as 100 people get clogged up behind them. You don't see the stars. It never really gets dark. There is always a glow of street lights, car lights, store signs, and buildings that never turn their lights off. I lived in the same town for 33 years. From the time I was a baby until I moved earlier this year. When I was young, the town was very much a suburb complete with farmland on the other side of the road, but over the decades it got more and more built up to the point of it being a damn city. It wasn't until I moved out to the country that I realized how much I missed seeing the stars. My new neighbor don't really get why I am so obsessed with the night sky here. Diversity isn't a slur to people in the city. It's a key to our way of life. I won't say I don't see race because that's f***ing stupid, but I'll say that a person's race doesn't really mean shit to me. I've always been taught by my parents that I had more in common with my next door neighbors who were black than I'd ever have with a rich white person. That stuck with me. And the idea of growing up in a town where 99% of the people are white freaks me the FCK out. My favorite thing about living in a big city, I'm a Nick, is that eating at a restaurant or going to the movies by yourself is perfectly normal. I'm the before times when I could. I loved sitting in a restaurant by myself during my lunch hour and just enjoyed my peace. If my boyfriend wasn't particularly interested in seeing a certain movie with me, I'd just go by myself and I loved it. No one looked at me weird. No one cared at all. The fact is, you're lost in the crowd and no one could give a shit. Cities are, oddly enough, perfect for introverts. I live in a pretty small city, but it's got its moments. We're basically surrounded by farmers and rural towns, and all the things I've read of people not caring about other people's business is entirely true. Whenever I walk through downtown, everyone that's not with a friend, family member, co-worker etc. is minding their own business and has no time to stop an immigrant on the street and yell at them for the way they talk. They're either on their way to work or on their way home from work and are tired and want to go home. Parking is a pain in the ass. Anytime you drive somewhere in a city, you either have to drive around looking for a spot and parallel park with an impatient driver waiting behind you, or pay to use a garage. Some places have parking lots, but depending on when you go they might be full. It's easier to take public transit or a lift. It's not quite the difference between country and city, but small city versus larger one. I lived in Boston for a few years and took the subway everywhere. It's quiet. People don't talk to each other. If you speak to the person next to you, they think you're a nut job if they don't know you. Here in Halifax, it's more normal to sit down next to someone you've never met on the bus and say hey how are ya, etc. I had a group of bus buddies who always sat and socialized together. We even threw a retirement party for one on the bus on her last day, with the driver's advance knowledge. Some of the people got on at the terminal and decorated a bit, etc. and surprised her when she got on. Would never have happened in Boston. You don't have to plan ahead. Ran out of Benadryl at 2 AM. You're in luck. About to leave home? No need to know how you're going to get there. Check the time and pick a train, Uber, bike, walking route. Friday night and you suddenly want to be social after hibernating all week? Check online, then show up at any one of the 1,000 options and venues. Get sick? There are 3 urgent cares and 8 clinics within a quick Uber distance. I always lived in suburbia until I moved way out into the country last year. The one thing I miss from living in a city is the convenience of everything. Like, anything you might want or need is a 5-minute drive or walk, away. And stores are open past 9 PM. I see it every day. If you are from out of town, I get it, the big buildings are impressive and it's fun to look up at them in amazement. There are only 2 things you need to remember when you do this: step out of the way, and whatever you do, keep your mouth closed. Eventually you'll get a bit of building juice in the mouth and there is no guarantee it's going to be water. That, even though it can take time and work, it is possible to truly find your people. In my small town there were 2 LGBTQ+ kids in the entire school and we didn't even really like each other, but we were friends because no one else understood our experience. Now I live in an entire neighborhood of us. Having lived in both, city folk aren't assholes. Just busy and usually already thinking about work by the time our feet hit the street. I have met the kindest strangers in the city. People who smile and yell good morning beautiful every day of the commute. RIP Stanley. 4th and E just isn't the same without your smile. Most folk here just want to make a living and be safe. If you can slow them down long enough to have a conversation, you would see that. I'm a country gal, 400 inhabitants, gone city girl. My family always says they would hate that nobody even knows their neighbors. I love this anonymity. It's refreshing to not have the neighbor ask where you went at 10 PM the night before and whose car that was in the driveway. I've bounced around both country and dense city. Both have their perks and challenges to overcome. The city offers seemingly endless new or slightly different experiences and places to explore. You can enjoy anonymity, but it's also cramped with people and the people feel more cold because of it. You get washed in light and noise pollution, which raises your stress levels. I enjoyed the couple decades I spent in a city, but now I'm enjoying the forest life. Wood fires, no people, fast internet, instruments, canoeing,